Hello, welcome to Arrow Bandwidth, your source for everything you need to know about the technologies, trends, and concepts that are steering our industry today. We hope that you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please subscribe. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or good evening, or wherever you might be. This is the North American version of Arrow Bandwidth. I am co-hosted by the illustrious and gorgeous David Fearne out of the UK, and Jamie Wong, one of our premier security engineers here in Denver, Colorado.
Fantastic. Phase 4 radio, at least that's why I do this podcast.
That's what my mom told me. Wait a minute.
So, Jamie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Jamie Wong. I am a technical solutions architect, but I am primarily focused on security.
Fantastic.
And you were in Austin, Texas, and now you live here in lovely Denver.
That is correct. I was born and raised in Austin, Texas. First time leaving Austin, or actually moving out of Austin, was out here to Colorado, and I love it.
Nice. I must admit, of all the places in America I would go and live, this would be it, because I'm big into outdoors. And every time I come to the airport, like I go to so for example, you go to London airport, you go to San Francisco or LA or New York, and everyone's like, you come here and it just feels much more relaxed, much more real. Home. It's really nice. I love it.
It will always be home. So, so what I'd like to do today in this session is we're going to do Security 101, part 2. So a couple years back, David and I co-hosted an original Security 101, much more around kind of state of the union, where things are at, what comprises security. But again and again at partner conferences, Jamie, I know you and I have been to things, David and I have talked about this, that we continue to get asked, hey, I want to get into security, or hey, what are you guys seeing around security? And so it's not necessarily, firewall endpoint stuff anymore. So, Jamie, you actually were talking to some of our internal folks this morning, so I'm going to kick it off to you. What is the state of security today? Network security, IT security, you have the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and network security is always a good place to start, right? Because that was where, in the past, people put majority of their focus was at their gateway. And it made sense at the time, but the problem is attacks themselves have evolved since then. And they've realized that, hey, if you get past the gateway, well, we can pretty much get to our objective, right? And so security has evolved and now has a presence in multiple places of your network. So it's not sitting just at the gateway, but we need visibility with our end users, with our servers, within our data center, our cloud environments. So we're needing a way to orchestrate or to really have visibility around all of that. So with different, I don't want to say just point solutions, but with different solutions around different areas of your network or different places of your network, they're generating a lot of different rich data. We need a way to kind of tie all that together. So we're starting to see a big trend, kind of a comeback really, with SIM technologies, incorporating a lot more machine learning, focuses with user entity behavior analytics, just a lot more orchestration in general. So vendor agnostic kind of approaches, a solution that can ingest logs, ingest data from multiple suppliers. I
knew I was here for a reason. So we're talking about data intelligence, really.
Exactly. So we're going to do a nice pony up for you on that. So
cool. I must admit, I remember a good few years ago now when the big thing in security was its ability for different security pieces of technology to talk to each other and be able to share what was going on in their vision of the world and then communicate that to something else to say, I'm seeing this, maybe you should look here. I think one of the biggest and funnest things about doing these 101 shows is that actually you can do them about every year because the 101 changes.
Yeah, exactly.
So what is, you've spoken about some of the areas, but in the field, where do you start? As a partner looking to, I suppose, getting in. Well, I'm going to start with a really, really basic question to start with because I'm going to play the stupid person here because I'm really not up to date on security anymore. If you are a partner who is in, say, storage or apps, and you want to get into security, is it even worth it anymore? Or has it moved on to such a degree that actually it's almost impossible to actually get started now, and you should just leave it to the people, the mainstayers, and be done with it?
So I'll take first crack at it and then let Jamie talk to it. So I get asked that question. I have the privilege of being with a lot of our large North American customers at conferences. And honestly, that's not a dumb question. They ask that, right? Hey, I do a ton of EMC and Citrix, but our customers are saying, hey, we need security. How do we start? Somewhat flippantly, and if you know me, that's not all that uncommon, is my answer is if you want to start a security practice, go buy one.
Yeah.
Now, if you've got the means, as they say in Ferris Bueller, I highly recommend it. If not, and you are committed to doing a security practice, then go find a security principal that actually has the chops, right? That has a background as a practitioner, that can actually talk the talk and walk the walk.
Yeah. You got to find the right person, right?
Right. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to start selling next-gen firewall and endpoint and call myself a security shop. You'll have some drag with that, and there's some ability to do adjacencies, but you won't be a security shop, right? It's going to be an add-on. And there's success in doing that, right? So we've had customers, for example, a fairly successful one in Midtown Manhattan was they did just that. They sold a ton of EMC, a ton of Citrix. Their customers were financial organizations, hedge funds, lawyers, and stuff right there in New York City. It was how do we help them with some of their security? Easy wins for them were newer endpoint, better VPN. But then it was they want to start talking about PCI and Basel and requirements and encryption. And the recommendation was you guys need to hire somebody to actually do that and walk you down that road. I mean, Jamie, are you seeing the same things when you're out talking to partners?
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough when you don't already have a security practice and you're realizing the need for it. I mean, ultimately, the goal of security is essentially the same. You're trying to protect your stuff, right? Your endpoints, your data, applications, all of that. And I mean, if you're wanting to not go maybe like a service route, but just wanting to start somewhere, you really got to focus on what's important to you and go from there, because there's so many different approaches to security. I mean, you can start at your application. You can start, like you mentioned, at the server, at the gate, or at the gateway, right?
So I suppose the advice is find an adjacency.
Yeah.
So if you're traditionally a storage-centric value-added reseller, find security that's adjacent to storage.
Yeah, so like
which isn't hard.
Encryption, data at rest, data in flight, data in motion, SSL encryption, network encryption, things like that. Those are good ones. Mobile devices, again, what are you doing for protection on those? Virtual desktops, things like that. So, and I think one thing for me is an interesting observation, and I'd like your guys' feedback on it. David, you and I just did a podcast around our cloud practices.
Last week,
around our cloud practices, and there was a lot of talk around security about that. And I think Jamie brought up an interesting point. Historically, we're worried about the gateway, whatever that is, the firewall, ingress, egress point. You think about that's your primary way in and out of the network. Until probably, 10, 15 years ago, and we in IT have to remember that we're outliers, right? Not everybody worked from home the way we do, but traditionally, you went to work and you used your machine, whether it was a desktop or a laptop, and you went home. If you worked remotely, maybe you VPN'd in, and it was a what we call a hard tunnel back to the office. Or I remember I had a dedicated phone line that dialed into a modem bank at the financial institution I worked at. You didn't just take your work laptop and bounce out to Starbucks and hit your VPN and bounce in.
Yeah, exactly.
And then so then you get a drive-by download and you get owned. You come to the office and, like Jamie was saying, I completely bypassed my perimeter defenses. And so I think that has created a ton of stuff. So from the one-on-one standpoint, I want to talk a little about some of the terms, and Jamie, where you're seeing them, and David, what you talk about visibility, and what does that mean when we talk about network and security visibility? Microsegmentation, is a buzzword that's getting thrown around. I don't know that I've seen a ton of traction on microsegmentation.
That's interesting. I would have thought from someone who's a network. So I've got a degree in network engineering.
Yeah.
Okay, so I come in from that very, very base layer. And I looked at that and I thought, oh my God, that's literally holy grail type stuff. But it looks incredibly complicated to actually implement and then, more importantly, maintain.
That's it, exactly. So I'll play the devil's advocate. So you're the network engineer. I'm going to come in with some sort of a micro-segmentation opportunity and say, hey, David, I got this really cool thing. It's the holy grail. However, I'm going to ask you to put it on top of your existing infrastructure and pray to God that we don't blow stuff up. Is that cool?
But is that... Right, okay, we digress slightly here, but I think it's an important point. Is that not the fundamental purpose, though, of software-defined networking?
I would say it.
We're pointing at Jamie.
We're pointing at Jamie.
No,
and she's
I would say it is,
yeah.
absolutely. But that's the challenge, right? I mean, it's hard to adapt because you're having to change everything and to be more software dependent now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put a poll out there on Twitter for us.
Yeah,
so hashtag
please do.
ArrowBandwidth. I'd love actual feedback from all y'all on who's actually doing SDN and if you're doing it in place. Or I will say, I will concede the point that in new applications, I'll say that it stood up as an empty box and then workloads are moved to it, right? Or an empty structure and workloads are moved to
I'll
it.
give you that. So if SDN is a bit of a non-starter, and I must admit, coming back to the real world, that's probably exactly the same trend that we're seeing in Europe. But what about NFV? You guys come across network function virtualization? I
see it in more like DevOps and testing, and it's cool, right?
Yeah.
But again, it's something that, and I'll take the heat, right? I was a network engineer for years, and I dealt with it. Is that you have a tough time going to specifically network engineers in large enterprises that have stuff exactly the way it is. They know where their VLAN configs are. They've got rancid config all set up. They've got all their trill links done. It's a really tough sell to say, hey, can I abstract all this stuff and make the change for the sake of change? When they're like, I don't change VLANs that often, right? I mean,
coming back to my network engineer sort of holy grail head on, service chaining. If I can literally give everyone their own personalized, well, not every service, its own personalized firewall, IPS, IDS, all of these services that were otherwise centralized because I only had one physical box on the network. Now I've got 1,000 virtual versions of it that are specific to the application and give absolute security inside my microsegmented network. Is that not a really good thing? Or is it once again one of these supremely practically impractical things to do in the real world?
Well, I'll tee this up. I'll softball it for Jamie. The answer is yes. If you can do that, it's phenomenal. I think what has happened is that to achieve that end goal is that security companies have stepped in a way without modification to the network. So you look at things like zero trust networks, or when you've got deep integration, like with like certain APIs, like VMware's got their vShield API that has a deep hook for outside the VM. It's at that deep API layer. Citrix has some options for the virtual shimming. You can deploy on a pseudo flat network, but still achieve that perimeter isolation. No, you're not in your own /32. No, you don't have your own ACLs, but it is an easier thing to deploy on top of a virtual environment, or to deploy like a 0 point or a zero trust network. Jamie, is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, definitely. And from a security standpoint, I mean, that'd be fabulous, right? We put security closer to all the application, all the servers that are there in the data center. However, the challenge is not slowing down workload, right? Mm-hmm. So when you have a lot of developers, and there's always that battle between DevOps and security, and that's kind of
that's going to be something that rages on forevermore.
Yeah.
The DevOps guys want to circumvent any possible thing that slows them down, and the security guys want to try and lock everything down to within inches. Right. Totally get that. So coming back from our digression, that was my personal little digression, because it's one of these things that I was always fascinated by it.
But to your point, though, this is actually what happens in real security discussions, because it is such a. That's the whole point. It's such a broad category. What the hell is security?
We call them rat's nests.
Yeah.
So on the note of what is security, what I would now like to do is I'd like to understand so if I'm a partner and I want to go and have a conversation with an end customer, what are the top things I should be going and talking about? Firstly, I'd like to know the top thing I should be going and talking about to differentiate myself. What's new? What's exciting? What's something that the customer might not have heard of, but is really quite a big thing that more people should be aware of? That's number one. And I'll come to number two in a minute when I've thought of it.
So we're talking about just, I guess, bigger trends that we're seeing? Is that kind of...
Yeah, exactly that. What's the biggest trend in security? What one of the things I always like to try and do is I like to try and give our partners a talking point, something they can go and take away. You give them a little sort of interesting sort of, this is something that you should be more aware of than you probably already are, and your customers are going to become more aware of. And actually, if you go in and talk about it with them first, you've immediately won their minds over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is just about environments in general, in that we're having to adapt our security posture with it, right? So before, everything was a hosted infrastructure that you managed. So now we're seeing that transition into adopting more cloud. So whether that means cloud applications or doing more of a hybrid deployment or just going full-blown cloud, right? So there becomes a security challenge with that, because now we're having to secure your own infrastructure as well as the cloud, right? So today I think people are needing more security with that in mind. So things that can play well with cloud solutions as well as...
It's like a federated hybrid security model, which...
Yeah. And there's additional challenges to that, like compliance, for example. So that's becoming a really big hot topic, is solutions that can generate these reports for you, compliance reports for you that make you aware. So
not desperately sexy, but incredibly important.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is often the stuff that gets forgotten.
So I have a 1A before you come in with 2.
That's fine. You crack on.
So last week, the question was asked to me from, I think maybe you asked it or TJ asked it. We talked about the delta between cloud environment versus on-prem versus hybrid, right? And so the security ramifications and all that thing. And the question to me was, do you think in 2019 and going forward, are on-prem environments more secure than cloud? And so, and I know how I answer, but I'm not gonna prejudice you towards an answer. But I would actually ask you that same question to see what you're hearing, because I know what I'm hearing, what my viewpoint is.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I don't know if I can say if one is more secure than the other. I mean, the challenge is the shift in responsibility, right? So are you trusting, the big players like Amazon to keep your data secure versus yourself, right? Where you have a lot more control, you have a lot more visibility into your own infrastructure. That's a really interesting question.
Could you go with it's equal?
Yeah, I'm torn, honestly. It's tough for me to answer that question.
So I'll give a little color to kind of where I landed. It was from when we talked about it so it kind of spun from the economics model, right? Of if you've got a server on-prem or an infrastructure on-prem, you got to think about a body to run it and patch it and maintain it and do this and do the things and do that. Versus if you provision a box from Azure, Microsoft, AWS, Google, Red Hat, Oracle, whoever, by and large, I mean, niche cases notwithstanding, out of the box, there are certain things that have been done for you, so that was our thought process that we were kind of discussing, if that helps.
Yeah, it does. So I think I was going a little bit beyond that, right? So thinking of how if we trust somebody else to do that job better than us, right?
Yeah, so that's actually a really, really important point to take away, is it's that which is trust.
Which is why I was saying I'm kind of torn in between, because ultimately I'd like to believe that me and my team would do a better job, managing our own infrastructure and securing it and patching it, etc., versus leaving that responsibility to somebody else.
This is how you know Jamie was a security engineer for real. She trusts no one except her own work.
Zero trust.
Exactly. Trust but verify.
Yeah, exactly.
So if it's like so for example, then let's look at some real world situations. So if it's like an AWS or one of the tier 1 hyperscalers, AWS, Microsoft, Azure, Alibaba, would you trust them to handle the security of your infrastructure as well as you could?
Personally, yeah.
Cool.
I do. Yeah.
Good. So we've picked the right ones then. Good news. Good news.
So good. Now, the cat's out of the bag is that you and I agree on that, so I don't look like a complete idiot. So.
Yeah, and that was sort of the conclusion we came to. And I suppose you have a lot of individual responsibility, but actually, are the responsibilities you have in securing the cloud any more or less sort of whatever than securing stuff on-prem? You still got to encrypt, you still got to have key management, you still got to do this, still got to do that, still got to do the other. And actually, as long as you follow those ways of doing things, you shouldn't actually have a big problem where your data is, really. Okay, so thank you. That's the future. Right, David, we haven't actually had yours yet. What are your future trends?
So,
what is everyone going to be talking about security this year?
So, and I've mentioned it as me the drum that I beat this year and the next couple of years. I really believe that the shift you're going to see in security, especially, I think more than other places, is around automation and orchestration. Yeah, there's a reason. There's tons of reasons for that, right? And we've talked about this. If you've spent more than 10 minutes with me at any one of our events, we've got a massive skills gap. Look at Slashdot. Look at any tech related thing, dark reading, whatever it is. Hit me up and I'll shoot you a list of all the stuff I read.
Yeah, we'll put some of the links in the show notes.
Yeah. there are not enough of us to go around, right? And so do you really want, very expensive security engineers like Jamie sitting and parsing your logs? No, you don't.
Absolutely not.
It's not realistic.
Yeah. So it's a matter of taking tools like SIM and your spam inboxes, things like that, and feeding them to some sort of an engine that can do things. Mm-hmm. And I hate the phrase AI unless it's Skynet. I think it's a marketing term. You and I can talk about that over a beer.
Very agreed.
But machine learning is a thing, right? So you look at things like Phantom, Swimlane, Demisto. There's a couple of really cool ones out there that are taking that known data set and saying, okay, known good, known bad, filtering that out. So it does, it takes that SIM to that next level, right? Because SIM, the whole holy grail, to use your phrase, of SIM was like, look, there's only 2 things you need to worry about. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It was. Except to boil it down.
Yeah, except on a 50,000 event per second network like Arrow, that's 2 events per second that are still considered important, right? And so if I can say, okay, I know that based on that source IP, that file, it's from David Fearne, we know we don't trust him, it's to this, we can score and say bad. We know that's bad.
Yeah.
And so then we can help boil that down. But then you can take it to the next level. So when you know it's a known bad, why even waste time with an analyst? Go fire off a script that says, hey, go actually drop this in a remediation VLAN. Have, your EDR tool come zap this thing or nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure, right? Do all these things automatically and then just send me a report on it. And then you can actually parse out that subset of things that an engineer like Jamie should go take a look at because AI says, hey, this is hinky. I've run it through my behavior analytics engine. I've scored it a certain way. I want you to look at this. So I'm all around the orchestration automation, and I think it's going to tie into probably this a little farther out, maybe 10 years. It's all of IT is going to be policy based around the business.
Yeah.
You will sit down with the business owners, the business leaders, the C-suite, and all of your IT orchestration, all your IT automation will be driven by that. What are your requirements? What are your needs from PCI, HIPAA, et cetera, whatever? What are your SLAs? What are your requirements for this? What do you want your response times to be? What are your acceptable outages? And that's what will actually drive those decisions. Do I put stuff on-prem? Do I put it in the cloud? Do I have tier 1 or tier 2 storage? Do I do dual links, et cetera?
And hopefully the net of all of this is that you don't have to make the decision.
Exactly.
For you.
Yeah,
exactly.
The policy makes the decision, right?
Yeah.
And so then actually it becomes that business. And again, it takes that risk management out of it. It reduces that risk posture. And from an audit standpoint, yay, because it's consistent year after year after year. Now, what that means for those of us in the industry is that all y'all that don't know how to do this stuff need to learn, right? If you're just a server admin, learn to do something else.
Yeah, we've said this for years. I have a really good story of a friend of mine who was a BlackBerry Enterprise Gateway, I think it was called, engineer. And he was like, this was in the height of when everyone had a BlackBerry. And I remember saying to him, you might want to diversify, learn about Microsoft Server or something like that. And he was like, no. This is literally going to be my job for the rest of my life. I'm on more money than sense. I mean, we were quite young at the time. And then he was just like, yeah, I'm done. I'm learning more and more and more. And within 2 years, BlackBerry had all but just
cratered,
imploded on itself. And he was out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's struggling to get like a level 1 support job. And I was like, diversity is critical. Once again, we digress. But sorry, did you want to finish?
No, I actually think to dovetail on that, we digress, but again, in security, these are the things, right? Because what I don't want to tell partners is go chase next gen, whatever, because you can be next gen all day long.
Yeah.
Yes, we all know who the shiny, darlings of the room are right now in the industry, and yes, they get a lot of attention, and yes, there's validity in learning those things because there's a market for it and go get it. But I would say don't hitch your wagon to just that thing, right? Yes, look in those trends. Obviously EDR, the new sexy EDR is important.
EDR is
and endpoint detection or remediation. So beyond antivirus. So let's say, hey, I found something. Okay, you found something. EDR will actually go do something, right? Like we talked about, it'll actually go take action. I mean, Jamie, are you seeing similar things? I mean, I don't want to dominate this, but what's your advice?
Not at all. So just kind of going off of the EDR conversation. So yeah, I mean, you have endpoint protection, right? And this is stopping things from actually happening. The problem, not I want to say the problem, but the difference between a endpoint protection solution versus an EDR is the EDR is going to give you the ability to see what led up to the event. So it's going to allow you to do a little bit more threat research and grab some more intelligence out of that. So whether that means, packets that were recorded and playbacks, or, you can actually see commands that were executed, all that good stuff.
So that brings me on. annoyingly, it doesn't bring me on to my actual next question, but I've got a question I'm really desperate to ask now. Threat hunting. How important is threat hunting in an organizational level? Should enterprises, based on literally what you just said there, because obviously if you've got that sort of audit trail, but you've got no one that can actually threat hunt, is this something? Is this a big thing? Is this a thing? Is this a
It's a thing. It's a thing. But like you said, so spinning off of that, right, you don't have a threat hunting team, right? You don't really have an incident response team already built out. Fortunately, there's tools that can assist you with that. So when you have things like EDR tools, you have threat hunting tools. But if you don't have a dedicated team to actually dive in to see exactly what happened so you can build more preventative measures up front, there are still preventative solutions around it. So if maybe just stopping the attack was the most important thing to you and not knowing the details behind it, it's
the trade-off.
It's almost a double-edged sword because the thing is with the prevention piece as well, you're not going to know what you didn't catch.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I would agree. And my counterpoint, it was, again, a little flippant, is why do you care? So I'm a car guy, if you know me. So I'll put it this way. The check engine light in your car comes on. You take it to the shop. They tell you, oh, yeah, injection, you've got an injector in bank 2 that's out. So why do you care? Are you a mechanic?
I have at the end of the day, if your job is to fix the car, as our job is to fix and make the network better, I care.
Right.
My CEO won't care, but my CEO does care that his car takes him from A to B, as he will expect his network.
Yeah.
We are the engineers who are saying the check engine light is on because this is the problem. So to that end, should enterprises be investing in threat teams, or actually is this a really good opportunity for partners to come and actually say, we'll sell you the software, but more importantly, when this pings up a big red light, we'll be the ones that go and do the threat hunting.
That's exactly right.
Build the policy, and away you go. You haven't got to invest in the skill set yourself.
So let's take a look at it this way, right? So if you've been on the interwebs for more than 5 minutes, you know that Arrow Electronics sponsors an IndyCar team. Do you think any of us here? I mean, I would like to play with the Indy cars, but if one of those twin turbo Honda engines throws a code and it goes up to the control panel, I have no idea. We pay people to do those things, right? Same thing, on a lower level is you have a Honda and Jamie's got her Nissan. If
GTR,
that's true. Jamie has a very badass car. But to your earlier point is that unless you want to have mechanics on staff, you may as well take to the shop and have them swap out the fuel injector. It's cheaper and more effective in the long run. Now, if you really want to tinker with it and fiddle around with it and do all those things from a nerd standpoint, and I use that because I am one too, I love doing the threat hunting because it's super fascinating. But at the end of the day, you're right. The boss doesn't care. And again, do you really want to pay Jamie to do that, or do you want her to, bigger picture? I see fewer and fewer organizations outside, like maybe the Fortune 10, that have threat hunting teams. They outsource it to these guys that are really good at it. They're also very expensive, right?
Absolutely.
That's why we have IndyCar drivers to drive our IndyCar.
Yeah. The good thing is, though, whenever you have solutions in place at, say, like your endpoint, for example, that is making these discoveries and collecting all of this intelligence, fingerprinting your users, that's when we have solutions that are like, orchestrating solutions, SIM type solutions, security analytic solutions that can make all this data useful. Just because we have a tool that can pull it doesn't mean we're going to do something with it, right? So whenever you do have a solution like a SIM or a security analytics, we can make that actionable because now we can identify what's normal behavior versus abnormal behavior, and then we can do something with that.
Okay. Well, that was meant to be a 5-minute question, which turned into a 25-minute question. But I'm still going to ask my next question because I think it's important. So that was 25 minutes on the future. But what about now? So my second part of that question was, that's what people should be looking at, to go and have that next gen conversation. But probably the question that should have come before that is, where are people not focusing enough at the moment? What are the existing types of pieces where more investment could be needed, or actually people are a bit underleveraged or not really taking existing problems seriously enough? Very much this is a your experience thing, because I don't think this is something that generally sort of pops up in the...
Do you want this one, Jamie, or do you want me to take first crack at this? Mine's really, really short and succinct.
Sure, yeah, take first crack.
Patch your stuff.
I like it, yeah.
It's
so undervalued.
Yeah, and it sounds so flippant, right? And that's the third time I've used it. That'll be the last time I use that word in this conversation. But realistically, right, I mean, I was an actual field engineer for years before I came to do this job, right? So I've been there, done that, I've lived it. No amount of fancy next-gen crap or SIM or behavior analytics is going to fix your damn internal blue flaw. Go fix it. Go patch it, right? Oh, I can't because downtime, let's just say Target, Anthem. I mean, how much is that worth? You know, and it's, I don't want to do the whole FUD thing because that's overplayed, but legitimately, everybody tries to fix, you know, the boat's rotted on the inside, kids. You know, y'all can't keep putting steel plating on it because the structure is just shot. So as painful as that is, and if you don't have the ability, and that's cool, not everybody does, find someone, right? I mean, we can hook you up with that. There are tools to automate even that kind of thing too.
I was going to say, I mean, so one of the biggest problems with getting investment in anything is you need to do something that's impactful and sexy. If I said I want to automate patch management, that is possibly the most unsexy term in the whole of the IT dictionary.
Right. What you say is I can systematically reduce our risk profile with a very low investment.
What you've just said, the names you've just brought up and the attacks that they were done by, fundamentally were just lack of up-to-date. You know, what makes me laugh is you bought this really expensive piece of technology, and you know the provider of that really expensive piece of technology, they're trying to keep you, you know, as safe as safe as possible. If you're not literally taking that new safe thing and applying it, then
again,
you're absolutely right.
Car analogy, right? I'm a car guy, right? You buy a brand new Corvette and you never change oil in it.
Yeah,
it's going to be really fast for about 3,000 miles, and then stuff's going to go real bad real quick. You know, for the lack of a $50 oil change, you've destroyed a $70,000 automobile.
You're absolutely right. So, Jamie,
I 110% agree, and that's actually what I was trying to get to when I mentioned the word compliance. Is there are tools around that now, especially with a little more focus on the cloud solutions, but there are tools around that. They're going to let you know, like, hey, did you know your users haven't changed your password? Did you know, there's like default credentials still being used? Things like that are extremely, extremely important. And these are holes in your security posture. Easy fixes, but they slip by, and that's the biggest problem.
And it actually probably dovetails into your earlier question. You know, how do we get involved in a security practice? That's an easy way. That's an easy question. And when's the last time you passed your Citrix box?
Yeah, and it's and what I like is one of the biggest problems we have in the IT industry as a whole is what I like to call the shiny box syndrome.
Totally.
Where everyone wants the new shiny box. And this is literally 101. This is not even 101. This is just 0.1. You know, we've been having this every Tuesday since, well, Microsoft began with Patch Tuesday. So, yeah, couldn't agree more. And what a great way as well. Nice, actual, very unusual for Bandwidth to give genuine practical advice. So thank you very much, guys.
I'll send you a bill.
And on that bombshell, as we like to say,
good night.
Thank you very much. Jamie, really, really appreciate coming on. Must have you back again soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
And David, as always, it's been an absolute nightmare.
No, thanks for co-hosting with us on the North American version, and we'll send you back across the pond as soon as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Catch you later.
Thanks, all.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening. To contact us on Twitter, use #ArrowBandwidth, and we'll see you next week.